For Samuel chapter 9, we are going to go to the end of the chapter. We're going to start in verse 17. You might already know this. I don't know if you think about life in terms of story. You should. You do in other areas. We have a natural narrative default. All of us do, because we are made in God's image. And God is a storyteller. God is the storyteller in the universe. And so naturally, we are defaulted in story. Everything you have ever learned in this life, you have learned through story. All information has been passed through story. It is not by accident that this is the most powerful medium in the entire world. This medium predates reading and it predates writing. Storytelling is essential to who we are. It's actually how we are wired. And you, right now, live in a story. Every moment of every day of your entire life, you have lived in a story. Now, before, I don't want to assume that we're all on the same page when I'm talking about story, right? I want to be a good, seminarian. One of the first things they do in seminary, beat into your head that we have to define our terms. Everything's definition. I want to just define a couple terms, give us some working definitions of what the idea of story is. As most of you know, I'm a filmmaker for a living, and so my whole career has been made and is centered around storytelling. It's served me well in the pastorate, and it served me well as a Bible reader. But I just want to talk about two unique angles within story, and it's going to relate to what we're talking about here today. Now, there is a thing called story in general, and then there's a thing called a story arc. Now, you probably know about these things. If I just say a couple more words, you might not be able to define them. I just want to give us some working definitions. A story, if you think about it at its base, a story is just a journey of a character that's changed through conflict. So imagine your life. This is why we call it your life story. If you were a character in your life, you have gone on a journey and you've been changed through conflict, through tension, through push and pull, all these realities, and this is kind of your life story. If you think about story arc, what's the difference? Well, story arc would be what we've already talked about: setting, conflict, rising action, the climax of a story, and then an ultimate resolution of that conflict. So there's a story, and then there's a story arc. Now, the difference might be if a story is the what, then the story arc is the how. That's how we kind of frame it in film worlds. Every story I've ever been a part of, I've done it for 15 years now, every story that I've ever been a part of in shooting, I'm thinking in these terms. What conflict, if I'm going to tell somebody's story, if I was going to tell anybody's story in this room, I would want to think about how have you grown as a character over your life, and what conflicts have you engaged in, what kind of tensions are represented in your life, and then how have you grown as a result of it? And so let's start with, where did you begin? What happened in your life that was a left turn you didn't see coming? And then, the tension related to that, and then is there a climactic moment in your life, etc. I just got done shooting someone's story, like a mini documentary, of a guy in Colorado Springs. His name was Mohammed Faraday. Now, this is an interesting guy. He was actually born in Iran. He was born and raised there. And Mohammed was in the Republican Guard there and wanted to go into their army, and was actually scheduled. He was being groomed for their suicide bomber sect. This is his picture of that when we were talking. His uncle had actually already engaged in several suicide attacks, was a part of planning some, and then himself was the, kind of the perpetrator of another one, and had a ton of fame in their little area. And so this was his goal in life, was I'm going to follow in this family trajectory, and I'm going to do this for Allah, right? I'm going to, get my reward. The problem is, he started asking questions in his life, and he was asking his questions that were centered around this idea of, am I a good Muslim? And he said, this was his story, I shot a 10-minute mini doc on him. He was asking, am I a good enough Muslim? And he would go around to all of his clerics and all of his people, and he would say, am I doing enough as a Muslim? And all of them would say the same thing: there's no way to know. Even this religious leader said to him, there's no way that I can know if I'm doing enough. How could I tell you if you're doing enough? And so he through this kind of discontent and this kind of disenfranchisement, he was starting to ask questions. And he had a friend of his that had read the Bible. And this friend came in and told him, hey, I'm not a Muslim anymore. And went through this whole thing and big fights. And lo and behold, later, Muhammad comes in, and now he is a Bible-believing Christian. He actually lives in Colorado Springs. He had to flee Iran because he was under death threat, and he got asylum here. And now has a full ministry to Muslims in Iran, from the base of Colorado Springs. This is the idea of story. If I'm thinking about somebody's story, is what are you? How have you grown as a character? What has happened in your life? And what has God done? Now, we all have a story like this. We always think about these kinds of stories and go, listen, my life is nothing like that, nothing sensational like that. But we all have a story. Everybody in here, God has done something. He's assigned you several different things. I think about us as the Cash family just for a second. It was 2000, the year was 2000, right? Y2K, when we were all going to die, and the whole country was going to implode, remember? It was Y2K when I first walked into a church in Tucson, Arizona, and I laid eyes on Tammy Farmer back then. And first thing I thought was, she's interesting. Let's investigate that. It wasn't very long after that I said to Tammy Farmer, it's not good to be a farmer anymore. You should be a Cash. I don't know if I even said it like that, but I thought it for sure. And 3 months after dating, we got engaged. And 6 months after our engagement, we got married. So the moment I laid eyes on her, 9 months later, we were married. And I know what you're thinking. The answer is no to that. But 9 months later, we were married. Sorry, inside joke. And so after that, what happens in our life? We move. I transition. I was a policeman at that time. We transition out of that career and go into another field, and we go to California. And in California, lo and behold, in 2003, first baby is on the way, and Jaden is born. You want to talk about conflict and tension in a story? Kids, am I right? Just kidding. No, it was an incredible reality of all of a sudden our life is taking on this new dimension, right? This new thing, and our story is growing. From there, we fast forward a little bit more, and our next baby, Micah, he's on the way in 2005. And it's incredible. And we're like, wow, we have this 2 kids, married. It's been great. From there, I finished Bible college, and we're going to go to seminary. And so go to Louisville, Kentucky. And I get involved with this. We land in an amazing church, and there is this couple in this church that have a ministry to seminary students where they let them they let them stay in their fully furnished basement apartment for free, as long as they're in school. So we land in this church. They don't know us from anybody, and they give us a place to stay. And I stay there for the duration of my school. And inside this basement apartment, which has been a gift from God, we get pregnant. And it's so cool because we learned this family, they're named the Halls. The Hall family became kind of our surrogate family because we didn't know anybody in Kentucky. And we met their entire extended family, their daughter, their kids. We were just a one big kind of happy family. Their daughter was a nurse in one of the local hospitals. It was an incredible thing. Tammy gets pregnant. We're excited. We now get to go as a family to go through this whole trajectory together. Before it was just us. So we go to the doctor. Baby, heartbeat, excited. Go back to the doctor, get an ultrasound. And I notice the tech won't look at me. And then I remember this tech quietly exiting the room. And I think, oh, this isn't good. And then I remember the doctor coming into the room. And I think, oh, this is bad. And our kids are here. And the doctor tells us, I'm sorry, your baby doesn't have a heartbeat anymore. And I remember that moment of what do you do with that, I don't know what you would do, but I know what we did. We all cried in the room. And we just cried. And I remember walking out into the hallway, and I see the Hall's daughter, this nurse who's in the hallway, and she looks right at me, and we both have that moment of yeah. And she knew it was happening. And it was devastating to our family. All the hopes and dreams all shattered in a moment. And as with any kind of situation like this, what do? You pick up the pieces eventually, and you move on. That's what you have to do in life. So, we're in the basement. I'm working. Still going to school. We get pregnant again. Whew, hallelujah. Miscarriage again. And we're like, okay, what are we going to do? Well, we get pregnant a third time. And I'm even talking with our pastor, and I'm like, and miscarriage again. And people have always laughed. Micah, so, he's this age, and then Avi's this age. Wow, what an oops baby, huh? No, we couldn't keep babies alive. We never stopped trying. We couldn't keep babies alive. And it was one of the most difficult times for me for multiple reasons. Number one, I'm living in somebody's basement as a man. That's hard by itself, right? You're kind of, in a sense, you feel like you're not providing for yourself. That's challenging. But it was a blessing from God. Also, we're having death all over the place. And what I didn't realize is I kind of forgot my identity in that moment. So I started to think, where's God in this? I'm in seminary. Where's God in this? I never abandoned my faith. I never made shipwreck of my faith. But I will tell you this, the blessing of that basement that started as a blessing became a curse to me. And that place forever reminded me of just death and kind of like a jail cell. And I kind of forgot my identity in that moment. Now, I think as we're in the story of 1 Samuel, this is all about identity. And I think this is the point of 1 Samuel. We are in the middle of a story in 1 Samuel 9, but actually we are in the very middle of a huge story in the entire Old Testament canon. God has been telling this incredibly huge and long story, and I think the entire point of this story is God is exposing the hearts of his people. Now, we have a benefit here, though, as we look into this text. And what's our benefit? Our benefit is we get to see this from the big picture. We turn a couple of pages, and it's centuries go by. We can see the entire trajectory of the nation of Israel. We're not living it moment by moment by moment. If I look at my family's history, I can say God has been moving in unimaginable ways. There's no question about it. Look at what he has done in our lives. There's no question. If I'm living in that basement, moment by moment, I'm thinking, where are you, God? Where are you when these heartbeats stop? Where are you? Where are you when we can't get out of here? Where are you? There's a trick. The trick is we have to see the big picture. We get the benefit of seeing the larger narrative here in the people of Israel. That's why when we read about what they do, we go, what are you thinking? Why are you doing this? It's so obvious. Well, you had the benefit of 30,000-foot view. They're living moment by moment. Now, let me ask you a question. In terms of the story, and we've talked a lot about story here. In terms of the Old Testament story, question for you. What is the significance of Israel coming into the promised land? Anybody? And I don't know. Perfectly good answer. Anybody know? I missed it? Okay, what way, please? Excellent. Excellent. Make you a great nation. Excellent. So Abrahamic covenant is, I'm going to make you a nation, and nations need borders, and nation needs, armies, all the things that a nation requires. All of that is God ordained. It's powerful. Is there something at a larger meta-narrative sign, though? The whole point, right? Genesis chapter 3, what happens that is so crucial that destroys the world? We are separated from God. We are expelled from his presence. The entirety of the rest of this trajectory is how close do you get to come to God? Think of this. When you die, separated from God, and you go to what we call hell, that is your final expulsion from God for eternity. And what we have seen is that the people were initially kicked out of the garden from God's presence, and then God has been systematically bringing them back. How do I reestablish fellowship with God? That's what the whole Bible's about. Right there, the whole Bible is answering Genesis 3. We are in one portion of this story, and they are coming into the promised land. This is the new, in one sense, Garden of Eden, where they are going to live with God again, and he will have fellowship with his people through the temple and through other means. And so the fact that they've entered the land again is radically significant in the story. Now, they come into the land, right? They come out of Egypt. Joshua finally brings them into the land. They start conquering. And what happens? How many generations, right? They experience all of those things, right? All the plagues that God did, these crazy things, the Red Sea, all of that. They experience all of this stuff, the faithfulness of God in the desert, all of that. And then Joshua, they take the land, all that, they conquer the different tribes that are there. How many generations are faithful to Yahweh after they conquer the land? One. The end of Joshua, the text specifically says they served the Lord as long as Joshua and the elders were alive. And then what happens? The book of Judges. And Judges is this cyclical sin just after sin, and this apostasy, leaving God constantly, right? So we have this storyline, and the reason I bring up all of that is that Samuel is this continuation of the story. But if you miss it outside of that story, you're going to start misassigning some of the details. We've already talked about a lot of them. I want you to see, I think so many people paint Saul in wrong ways. We talked about this last week a bit. They paint Saul in wrong ways. Now, I think here's what you have to see from a story perspective, in a story arc. Saul is being presented not as a villain. He's actually being presented as a mirror. He's reflecting the kind and the state that the people are in. Saul has already, last week we talked about the donkeys and all that situation. Saul has already been presented as a poor shepherd. What's happened? His dad loses his donkeys, and Saul can't find them, to the point where he wants to just give up. And it's his servant that comes in and says, no, we can go and find him. Let's go and talk to, this guy over here. He's this man of God. Saul says, I don't even have anything to give him. I haven't been prepared. This servant says, I have something to give him. This servant is found prepared. Saul, the shepherd, is found wanting at every single turn in the story. And it's a microcosm. It's this picture of Israel. And then what do we find? Samuel gets commissioned by God to come in and to anoint Saul as the shepherd of Israel. This shepherd, who is terrible, is now going to be anointed by God to shepherd his people. Why? Because they are not going to get the king that they need. They're getting the king that they deserve. And that is indicative of where Israel is in the religious state right now. So as we look into Samuel now, so grab your Bibles. As we look into this text, I want you to be thinking we have to have all of this at our back, right? This story's not plucked out of nowhere. It's coming from a context. We have to keep these things in view. Let's go start in verse 17. And I just want to chunk it out like we do in the past, and then we'll just kind of talk our way through it a little bit. 17 says this. When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, here's the man of whom I spoke to you. He it is who shall restrain my people. Then Saul approached Samuel in the gate and said, tell me where the house of the seer. And Samuel answered Saul, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for today you shall eat with me, and in the morning I will let you go, and I will tell you all that is on your mind. As for your donkeys, that were lost 3 days ago, do not set your mind on them, for they have been found. And for whom is all that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you and for all your father's house? It's a subtle thing that just happened there. He doesn't know. You got to be reminded of where Saul's at in his mindset right now. All he's doing is looking for animals. He has no idea the intersection that's about to happen right here, right? He's looking for animals. He doesn't even know Samuel, doesn't recognize him. He says, I'm the guy, come with me, right? And then I'll tell you all that's on your mind. What's on Saul's mind? Donkeys. That's it. And what does Samuel do? He, by the way, showcases that he's a prophet by saying, there's no discussion in the text that they've already had any talk. So there's no way Samuel would know that That's what he's there looking for. He says, stop thinking about donkeys, right? They're dealt with. And then he says that key phrase there in, what verse is that? Verse 20. And for whom is all that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you and for your father's house? You're thinking small here. Everything that Israel has to offer, isn't it for you? You're in this moment here. This moment's about to happen. And is Saul going to miss this moment? Well, there are larger, I think this is the point that he's saying here. Stop thinking small. There's larger realities here that are happening. There's larger things afoot right now. Let's continue. 21. Saul. 21 says, Saul answered, am I not a Benjaminite, from the least of the tribes of Israel? And is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me in this way? Remember we talked about Benjamin, just to be real quick refresher. Benjamin in the state of Israel, in the recent history of Israel in Saul's day, they are the lowest of the low because of what happened in the book of Judges. We don't have time to go back over it. So he points this out. What do you mean all the riches of Israel are from me and my house? I'm from Benjamin. I'm from Benjamin. And by the way, even in Benjamin, I'm the lowest of the Benjamin people, right? So he's kind of showcasing that you probably got the wrong guy here. But I think that this is interesting, right? He is stained in his mind from Benjamin, but I think it's instructive because God sees beyond that. That's not the point. I think that it's instructive for us because what do we see? I mean, right away here, we're going to see it in just a second, but we see that God looks beyond that. God can use anybody, anywhere, any way he chooses to use them. Doesn't matter if you're from Benjamin or from Lebanon or anywhere else. God uses whomever he wants, whenever he wants to, for his glory. And I think that's what we're going to see with Saul here. Let's continue on in 22. Then Samuel took Saul and his young man, remember the guy that was with him, and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited, who were about 30. And Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion I gave you, of which I said to you, put it aside. So the cook took up the leg and what was on it and set them before Saul. And Samuel said, see, what was kept is set before you. Eat, because it was kept for you until the hour appointed, that you might eat with these guests. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. Really important, he's seated at the position of honor, right? He's given stuff that was set ahead of time for him, that was kept for him. And why do we care about all that? This was all, Samuel's words, for this appointed time. Think about this. Saul is en route, trying to just find these animals, has no concept that he's walking into a kingship. He has zero concept that he's at this crossroads moment in his life. He still doesn't recognize it. All of a sudden, this man of God that he actually resists even going to talk to him initially. He comes to this man, and he's going to be given a kingdom. Let's close out the verses here. I do want to always think about this, though, when it comes to just, again, instructive to us that it does not matter where you come from, right? Don't think about, I don't have the... In my circles, it's funny, in the film world, especially in the apologetics film world, a lot of people have this idea of like, well, I haven't had this degree, or I haven't been here, or I don't have this kind of, resume, I don't have these kinds of things. And it's totally irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant in how God chooses to use people for his glory. And so the goal for all of us is not pedigree. The goal is not a powerhouse resume. The goal is not some sort of academic paper. That's not the goal. The goal is faithfulness and hunger for God's glory and his kingdom, and that he would be made much of. Let's finish this verse here. We'll start in 25. And when they came down from the high place into the city, a bed was spread before Saul on the roof, and he lay down to sleep. Then at the break of dawn, Samuel said to Saul on the roof, up, that I may send you on your way. So Saul arose, and both he and Samuel went out into the street. As they were going down to the outskirts of the city, Samuel said to Saul, tell the servant to pass on before us, and when he has passed on, stop here yourself for a while, that I may make known to you the word of God. Saul is on a donkey mission. I always find that ironic. He's on this donkey mission, and his life is about to radically change. What we're going to see in chapter 10, not today, is they're going to do a private ceremony, and then they're going to do a public ceremony. So there's going to be this two-part reality here. And Samuel's going to prove to Saul that what he says is going to happen, it's actually going to take place, and then it plays itself out the way that he said it would. And Saul, the question is, here's the difference. Let's talk about story one more second. The difference between narrative versus, like, let's say, doctrine. And there's doctrines within narrative, but when you hear a narrative story, what we are supposed to do as good listeners, right, which is what we do with all stories, is we're tracking with the story and we're gleaning principles within. God is the same God. So how does God operate in these things? What does God do? That's how I know God operates in my life. And the different characters that are being presented, right? We are being shown right now an entire nation. We're being shown what that leader of this nation and who he represents and how he operates. And we are being given a strong corrective inside of it. It's not going to come straight out and say, don't do this and do this. But we're learning from lessons, right? So as we learn through these narratives, think about it in these ways. Because story and story arcs are so critical. And what we're going to see is this. When it comes to the story arc, you got to think big picture here. Saul is the king that Israel chooses. What we're going to find later is that David is the king that God chooses. And ultimately, we're going to find that Jesus is the king that God promised. And so we have this story arc and these foreshadowings happening all over the place in these stories, and you've got to see them. Here's what I would say, and this is kind of maybe a way to think about it. And I want to think about this as it relates to even us. Saul points to David. This is the point. This is what you choose, but God has another choice. Saul points to David. David points to Jesus. No question about that. And Jesus points to no one. Think about this. Jesus points to no one. All of these other shadows, this entire book of Samuel, the entire Old Testament, they're all pointing to one climactic point in the story, and that's Christ alone. Christ alone will be able to undo what happened in Genesis chapter 3. That's the point of the story. That is the answer to the Genesis problem, to the sin issue that we have. And when you think about this, Jesus is now not writing another story. He's the first chapter in the new creation story. This is him. And so now we're not waiting he's not a foreshadow of something else. We're waiting on him to come and get us. And have you ever thought about this, especially Christians in the room? Have you thought about this? Jesus is reigning right now. He ascended, right? He's seated and he's reigning. And if you are in him, that you have a kingdom coming. And I don't mean fairy tale once upon a time. Have you thought about these things? All of us, we are rocketing towards the afterlife. Every one of us, right? We will meet our death soon. Historically speaking, in a blink. You are headed towards a kingdom where Jesus is the king. He's ruling. And your lot is thrown in with Jesus. Whatever's true of him is true of you. His holiness is your holiness. His righteousness, yours. You are a co-heir with Jesus. He's not pointing to anybody else. He is the point. And he's this new chapter in this new creation. I think that is the point that we're seeing in these story arcs. I want to talk really quickly just to kind of try to wrap up this chapter of chapter 9. I just want to think about identity and a forgotten identity. And I think this is the point that we're being shown in Samuel within Saul's life and the nation of Israel through Judges and following. Israel forgot her identity. Israel's identity, Aaron mentioned this, Israel's identity from the Abrahamic covenant following was to be a light to the nations. And she failed miserably. She, in fact, didn't want to be a light to the nations. She wanted to be like the nations. This was her call. She wanted to be like the nations. She didn't want to bring light to them. She wanted to be them. Forgotten her identity. Forgot why she was set apart, what she was called into. When it came to the monarchy, she forgot her identity. She didn't want a Deuteronomy 17 style king, the one that Moses always had prepared for. It was not Deuteronomy 17. They want a king like the nations. And so we forget these identities. Now, what did they do as a result then in Samuel? Well, they chased Saul. They chase after Saul. And don't we do the exact same thing? Listen, Saul looked good on the outside. He looked like what you and I would think of when we think of a king. Guy that looks nice, guy that's built, guy that's strong. And it's all surface level. Now I wonder this, and here's the question for all of us truly. Saul turned out to be, and I think this is what he's being presented as, is a hopeless counterfeit. Hopeless counterfeit. Who's going to be the authentic king? We got David. He's coming. But we're going to see the bad example first. What Sauls are you chasing? Don't we do that? Are we all that different? We're not that different. What hopeless counterfeits do you chase right now that you think, this looks good on the surface, this is what I would want, this is what would make my life happy, this is what my life would have meaning in? Is that what you're chasing? A hopeless counterfeit. I think what happens to Christians, I'll just speak for the Christians in the room, it's true of all people, but I'll especially speak to the Christians in the room. I think what happens to us is that we get focused down into the smaller details of life. You get stuck in the weeds, and you forget the big picture. You forget what God has been doing in your life. And so if one little misstep happens, everything's lost, and God has abandoned me. My finances get screwed up, I'm done. Everything's over. I'm going this way in work, and I lose a few jobs in my film career. I guess God doesn't want me to do this anymore. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And then I start to chase counterfeits. I try to then seek security in things other than God himself. Because God ain't doing it, maybe this will. Christians in the room, and really, Greg Cash, you have a faith problem. That's your issue. It's not an issue of your circumstances. God sovereignly put those circumstances in your path. You have a faith problem. Lord, help us have faith. And if he chooses to strip us down to nothing, we'll be like Job. Even if you kill me, I'm going to worship you. How many of you in here have a faith problem today? Chasing Sauls, man, chasing Sauls. That's what we need. That's the king we need. That's what would change this whole country. This was what turn it around. This would be the thing that would bring purpose into my life. This would bring security. I just want to provide for my family, right? We try to Christianize it. I just want to do all these things. You have a faith problem. That's all it is. And what do we do with that? Repent. Repent. Confess that sin. Lord, I do not trust you. Help me to trust you. Right? Help my unbelief. Lord, have mercy on me. Here's the trick, I think, for Christians. Don't forget the story arc. Think about your family. You know how many times in the scriptures, we've looked at them multiple times Wednesday nights. You know how many times in the scriptures they go back over the narrative of Israel? You know how many times they retell the story of Israel? Why? Because we forget and we get stuck in the weeds and we think God has abandoned us. And so they go back and they go, remember when he took you out of Egypt? Remember what he did to Pharaoh? Remember what he did when your back was at the water and we didn't know what to do? Remember, 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 remember. Why? Because we love to forget. And we have faith problems. And so I wonder about your story. I gave a snapshot moment of our story. And I'm guilty, probably more than any of you, with getting stuck in the weeds and going, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't know what's going on. And Tammy and I have to have many a talk to go, where are we at? And let's be reminded of some things. Think back to the Cash family story arc. What has God already done? What has he been doing? What? He's going to take us all the way out here and drop us off? That's not how God does anything. He's never been that kind of God. That was them in the desert. At least we had meat in Egypt. What, God's taking you out to the desert so you can die? That's not true. Don't we do that today? I do that. And then I start chasing Sauls. Christians, don't forget your story arc. And maybe you need to speak your story arc to each other. Don't get stuck in these immediate circumstances, because God has always been faithful to his people. Always. Always. He has attached himself to you. He is faithful to his people. You have a faith problem. Okay. We recognize the issue. Now let's deal with it. I would ask you to do something this week. I don't normally give homework because that sounds weird from a pulpit. But here's something I think you should do. And I don't think you should do it this week. I think you should do it tonight. I don't know. Some of you guys have different, house settings. Some of you guys do the whole dinner at the table thing. We've never done that as a family for some reason. We just always hang out together in living rooms and all that. Wherever your hangout spot is, wherever you congregate with your people, especially men in the room, right? Especially fathers in the room. Here's what I would say. Go tonight and speak your story arc to your people, to your family. Hey, let's talk about what God's done in our family. Let's just kind of walk through the timeline real quick. What has God done? I know you guys have a crazy story. I know we've talked about it many times. I think of Zach. I know bits of your story for sure, but your kids need to know. Your kids need to know that they're not serving their dad's God. They're serving the God of this universe, right? And I think that's a key distinction. What has God done for the Carter household? What has God done for the Cashes? What has God done for us? Speak that to your family. I think that there's power in being reminded that God has been faithful. Look at what he's done, and he will be faithful now and forevermore. Tonight, okay? Can we all agree without doing a real raising of hands that we will do that tonight? Right? God is listening. Okay? Okay? That we agree. Tonight, tell your family your story. There's going to be a day, son, you have your own family. I don't like to think about that. There's going to be a day you have your own family, and you're going to be this cash branch that goes off. And you're going to need to tell your family the story that you've lived. Right now, you're in my branch. So you're a part of our story. But this story has to be told. You've got to be reminded. Because if you don't, you will get lost in the weeds and you'll think God's abandoned you. Or even worse, you'll think you're doing it on your own. That's worse. You'll think you're self-sufficient. I think that's what we're seeing in Samuel. Israel is being exposed for their hearts. And they're being given the king not that they need. They're being given a king that they want. May it never be true of us. May we always remember what God has done in our families, in our lives, and where we are headed to this kingdom reality with Christ as our Lord. And may we always know that God is faithful and to him alone belongs the glory. That's why we exist. Let me pray.